So it's getting a little rowdy here in the main parlor. A couple of sessions have come in and out, and so people are visiting and catching up. And if you always take a good look at some of the wider shots that we have, I'm sure you'll recognize a couple of people here. This is really always a very interesting gathering of 1,600 people from around the state, and business leaders and heads of philanthropy and educators. And it's a really interesting cross-section, politicians, people who are in the position to affect change in the state of Michigan. Many of them are all right here, and they're talking about various aspects and kind of some of the challenges that we have in the state of Michigan. And not only in Michigan, there's also always a lot of focus on the city of Detroit and the continued revitalization of the city and the growth in terms of development, stretching out into the neighborhoods. And joining me right now to talk a little bit about that is Anika Goss-Foster. She is the CEO of Detroit Future Cities. And welcome back to My Week,
Thank
Anika.
you.
It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Christy.
So as you kind of come through the crowd,
Yeah.
what are some of the conversations that you're beginning to have with people, or what are they asking you mostly about?
Yeah, well, people are asking about the vacant property report that we just released.
Yeah, you guys just released this huge report. Not only talking about, because when we talk about vacant properties, a lot of times we focus on homes,
right,
in some of the neighborhoods. But now you're looking at industrial sites, and
that's
not
right.
just the Packard plant, which everyone automatically thinks of when you think of that kind of industrial blight, but the smaller ones. I was surprised to see the number.
Yes,
it's
almost 900. That are throughout the city. And I think what's also surprising is that only 2/3 of them are, not only, but 2/3 of these sites are less than 100,000 square feet. So
really?
These aren't Packard plant sites. These are really modest. They were probably tool and die shops, small vacuum cleaner factories and watch factories, and that used to be the way the neighborhoods were designed in Detroit, were scattered throughout neighborhoods so people could walk to work. And now many of these properties sit fallow and vacant, and that's a real problem for us.
So talk to me specifically about what that does for a neighborhood or a pocket area that maybe is trying to increase property value or trying to rehab some homes in that area, but you've got I guess you could say eyesore, would you call it? But that is it's not going to be easy to clean up.
That's a really good question, and that was one of the reasons why we decided to focus on it. When you have 900 sites, they are scattered throughout the city, and unfortunately, they are often scattered in the parts of Detroit that are not being reinvested in, that are the lowest income neighborhoods where people of color live. And so they end up creating these pockets where people are isolated economically and create environmental hazards that are that manifest over time and through generations. And I think if we're going to think about how to revitalize Detroit as a whole, as a city, we have to really be strategic about how we move Detroit forward in its entirety. So every neighborhood has to have an opportunity to grow and thrive, and you can't when you have such an incredible albatross in a neighborhood that's holding that neighborhood back from redevelopment.
All right, so now that you've identified all of these various areas, I can only guess that you have a list now or a specific kind of strategic plan about, all right, if we want to attack this is how we're going to have to go about doing it.
So what we really wanted to do in our special report was identify the problem and provide the baseline data for this, and then make some recommendations about what needs to happen in the future.
Okay.
I think the next step, what we also understand is only about 1/3 of these properties are publicly owned. So we really need to get a better handle on who these private owners are, right? That's one of the first things that we have to do. And then the second thing we also have to do is create an opportunity for partnership between the city, the state, the federal government, and the private sector to create a fund or capital stack to actually redevelop these properties. And so the reason the state and the city are so important in terms of cooperation on this is because in order to move these properties at all, you're going to need brownfield tax credits.
I was just going to see, so what kind of policies are we going to start to look at?
We start with brownfield tax credits, what we already have in place. and then other kinds of tax credits and tax increment financing that would allow us to put a large amount of capital in these redevelopment properties, especially for some of the smaller ones that can turn over quickly, and incentivize private developers to come in. I mean, it would be, we're not going to have a flexing gate in every neighborhood, right? That's going to make a major investment. But you might have a few smaller business owners that want to redevelop a 75,000 square foot property into a gallery and artist center, or an entertainment center, or a different kind of retail center, or back to some other manufacturing.
But you've got to be able to show them the pathway to be able to get it done.
Exactly. There has to be, right now, it looks, even for the smaller properties, it looks completely unmanageable and infeasible to do.
I think it's really interesting and watching the development of Detroit Future City.
Oh.
And I think the historic nature, I mean, the fact that you're doing studies like this.
Yeah.
You came on my week just a couple months ago talking about the study about home ownership versus rentals, and the fact that there are more renters now in the city of Detroit than homeowners. How would you describe, I guess, to people the change a little bit that Detroit Future City has undergone, and kind of where you wanted to target future?
Yeah, thank you for noticing that. So I think at Detroit Future City, what we're trying to do as part of our strategic plan is we want to really be seen as Detroit's think tank for the future. And we have this book, this 450-page book,
right,
the Detroit Strategic Framework, that guides us over the next 50 years of what we want. 163,000 Detroiters said this is what we want Detroit to look like. Well, we have to be able to start with stabilizing of where Detroit is right now, neighborhood by neighborhood. We have to be able to say, this is everything that makes up this neighborhood. And so in order for us to move forward, we have to be able to stabilize these things so we can advance the city in this different way. And one of the ways that we can do that in a way that's inclusive and cooperative and where everyone has a voice in the process going forward is making the data and information really easy and accessible early on, and then allowing for other kinds of partners, and whether they're local experts or national or international experts, to then say, okay.
But here you have it. Here you got the roadmap.
Yes, and that's really, I think, where the right role for Detroit Future City going forward.
All right, Anika Goss-Foster, we can't wait to see what's next. So you make sure you come back and see us again as you continue to grow. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Oh, thank you so much, Christy.